All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Colin, and welcome to episode 14 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk, a show where we, the Roll by Roll gang, discuss various aspects of running a great D&D campaign based on our experiences with D&D 5e and our current adventures in Emathan homebrew campaign. So joining me tonight are the rest of the Roll by Roll crew. We have Egan, who plays Douglin and Lafferty. Welcome, Egan. We have
Thank you
Max,
very
who
much.
plays Kogon.
Hello.
And we have Barry, who plays Nightingale and Landis.
Glad I could make it tonight.
We're glad you could make it as well. Well, welcome, guys. So during our last Saturday night adventures in Emathan session, we came up against a few rules that we weren't 100% sure on. One around carrying someone and what the movement rate was for that, and one I haven't even had a chance to look into yet, which is using beads of force with the catapult spell. So I'll have to get my head wrapped around that one. But I mean, that's it's very common in 5e. When you come up against something that doesn't happen very often, there may or may not be a rule around that. So that got us talking, obviously, about D&D rules, which actually we've been doing almost for the last hour leading up to this. So we decided we would continue that discussion tonight. So we're going to start off with just everybody's general thoughts on the D&D 5e rules. And Barry, why don't we start off with you tonight?
Well, my general thoughts are rules are necessary. As we were talking about before, you're never going to have a rule set that's going to make everybody happy. But just understand that with your table, whatever you decide are the rules, which ones you want to follow, which ones you don't. Just play to whatever makes you happy, but you need rules to create that consistency. So they're important, but you can hate them all you want.
Yes, you can hate them all you want. Max, your general thoughts on D&D 5e rules?
Yeah, I'd say that they're pretty well tailored to each other. You're always going to come up against certain mixtures of things where it gets a little confusing. And I've been on a roller coaster because I started out as a player in 5e and I've taken to DMing, and I've kind of realized some of the challenges that DMs face when coming across combinations of things that can affect, maybe either cause confusion or basically water down your challenge that you thought you were going to be bringing to the table. So yeah, I'd say they're solid, and they're definitely overall designed for player fun. And I think 5e really achieves player fun if you embrace that side of things. So
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree. Egan, your thoughts on D&D 5e rules in general?
I'm going to take a little different take on this and say that I actually love what it does to encourage everybody to research, to actually delve deeper than video game level, how to, smash and kill. Like I love that D&D players get away from the the YouTube shorts and the TikToks that are just 10 seconds long. You have to invest time to understand and go searching. Like we had a stacked effect, right? Did dissonant whispers, overcome the fact that Max's opponent was not able to do a reaction? So, all right, well, how do we figure that out? So I actually love that it encourages people to dig a little bit deeper. And again, it's another testament to this wonderful game that it is teaching people, as we said, rules are there. It's a structure for the game, but you got to figure it out. It's not superficial level.
I'm definitely smarter because of this game.
Absolutely. Hey, I know how to spell miscellaneous because of D&D.
Because
that
of
goes,
D&D.
yeah, that goes way back. So,
And I
yeah.
can say prestidigitation, so,
Yep. Yeah.
For myself, I like the D&D 5e rules. As Max alluded to, they're not perfect, but they are a good set of rules. I, it's pretty clear looking at past editions. If you go even just back as far as 3.5, had a lot more rules to deal with various situations. They went into 4E and that really got crunchy, which I think appealed to a certain group, but did not appeal to the group. I think D&D players at in a larger sort of group, and you saw one of the fastest transitions to
Yeah.
another edition, which moved into 5E, and 5e kind of took a 180-degree turn away from what they had been doing in 4e, where they really simplified the game. And I think undeniably that's been a big part of D&D's success, is the game got easier for regular people to understand. And that's a great thing. But for myself, the biggest thing I always keep in mind is it's the rules are a guideline, and it's encouraged for a group, for a table, to mold that guideline however works best for the type of game that they want to play. And I think 5e really lends itself to that. I know for myself, when we get into some weird rules situation, I usually go back through other editions and see how it was dealt with in other editions for some guidelines on how to add to the guidelines. So I I love 5e rules. They allow us to play the kind of game we want, where it's not as crunchy. We're not as worried about how many times in our game I'm just like, I have no idea. Roll a d20. If you get it high enough, you made it. Like that's good enough for me. And if that's the game you want, keep it simple. 5e is pretty good for that. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the rules we love and hate. Or even myself, I'm going to lean a little more into some game mechanics that rules are wrapped around. But Barry, why don't you kick us off? Love or hate it? What do you got? What are you starting us with?
Well, neither. My rules aren't about love and hate. It's about rules that are commonly misunderstood.
All right.
Now, one of these is the ready action. Everybody hears it in, combat. Okay, I'm going to ready an action so that when the guy walks around the corner, I'm going to shoot him with my bow. So basically, what the ready action is doing, it's allowing you take your action on your reaction. So you state what will trigger it. Once that event has happened, you can choose to expend your reaction to have your action, which you had already pre-stated. So it can get complicated. You have to remember that you lose your reaction. So the next time that bad guy moves away, you don't get that extra attack in there. But there's also some other rules, especially around spell casting, that make the ready to action a little less appealing than, just taking your action on your turn. So if you decide to cast a spell as a readied action, you basically cast the spell on your turn, but you contain the magical energy until the reaction, and then you allow that to go. So that means you have to hold concentration on that spell until the specified trigger happens, and you can use your reaction to cast that spell. So that eliminates you from holding any type of concentration spell to ready a spell. So that, brings that power level down a little bit, which we were talking about before. It's kind of important to bring the power level down on wizards because they're insane. And if you lose concentration, you still that spell slot's gone and you didn't get to do anything. And when that trigger happens, you go and nothing happens. So
It fizzles out.
it fizzles out in your hands. And another really interesting thing that people get wrong with readied actions is warrior will ready an action to attack somebody if he comes near. If you do that and you have multi-attack, you only actually get to do one attack because you readied that attack. So you can't do multi-attack with the readied action. So it's again, it's something to keep it so that not everybody at the table is readying actions and the DM's trying to remember who's what out of which order of initiative and keeping track of all this stuff. So it makes it so it's a little less enticing to do every single round. But yeah, it's definitely something people get wrong quite often.
I think the spell part of it, I know for myself, is one that I didn't realize for quite some time that if you ready a spell and you don't trigger it, you lose that. Like, say
Yeah.
your trigger never comes along, you lose that spell
Yeah.
anyway.
The spell's
So,
already been cast as your action. You're just delaying it for your trigger. But if it doesn't happen, yeah.
yeah.
Kaputski, you swallow it.
Oops. Oops.
Max, tell us about a rule. Love it, hated.
Okay. Well, I didn't know we were gonna get into love hate
Well, it
side of
doesn't have to
things.
be love
So
hate. It could
my
just
second
I'm
be.
the
my
same.
my
It's
my
all hate.
first one, I might just I'll pull out the semi-obscure misinterpretation thing, and then maybe the next one I'll get into the love hate thing. Okay. I might revamp what we talked about earlier. So my one is for just about again action economy and spells. So this happens. It would happen all the time at my table for the first few months, um, and it's that you can only cast one spell on your turn. So the amount of time it takes to cast a spell, which is either an action or a bonus action, doesn't matter. So if you cast a spell using a bonus action, like Spiritual Weapon, that does not mean you can cast Bless afterwards, for example. You can attack, you can do something else, but afterwards that spell has been cast. Cantrips don't count towards that. So you could still cast a cantrip afterwards as well, as your action. But yeah, so that's kind of one that's often misinterpreted. You only get one spell to cast of a spell level. And that's why sorcerers can get so powerful.
Yeah. And you know that I like that one, Max, because I know for a lot of people there's no separation in your mind between a cantrip and a spell, but they are different things. You know, because
As powerful as cantrips are.
they're not burning up spell slots, which is really what they're saying. You can only
Yeah.
use one spell slot
Yeah, that's a good way to
on
frame it.
on your turn. So
Yeah.
yeah, I know. I used for a long time. I thought you couldn't cast a cantrip because well, it's a spell.
Yeah.
But yeah, Egan, what do you got?
Yeah, I didn't get the love memo either. So this is a lot of the I don't want to say
You
hate.
went with the
That's
other one.
yeah, this is gonna be
This is a
leaning a
vent
little bit.
episode, is that?
Yeah, yeah, it's venting. That's perfect. No, my I guess picadillo would be, and I have a few. I don't know if we're gonna circle back for others, but it's conditions. There's a couple of conditions and how that affects the gameplay. I'll start with blind and invisible, kind of two sides of the same coin, if you will, and really how it pertains to combat, right? Disadvantage to attack someone who's invisible, or if you're attacking blind. I don't think is enough that there is just disadvantage. Like there are certain situations, or I think it should be situational, that you can't even get an attack off, right? Like imagine if you cast invisibility, you're not in melee range, and it's a stone floor, you got soft boots on, and you go in a random direction. How does, let's say, an orc pick you out to even have disadvantage, right? And they still get all their bonuses to attack, etc. Um, I mean, in some cases, and I think, Colin, you actually have done this, make a perception check before you even have a chance, right? Like, I think that it shouldn't just be disadvantage if you're, what do you call it, invisible. There should be other factors that come into play. Now, there are certain feats, there's certain powers that creatures have that would mitigate that, lack of vision. You've got echolocation, you've got
Blind sense.
sense of smell,
Yeah,
blind
one
fighting,
sense. Yeah,
exactly. Like, yeah, which is fine, but that's a power that actually mitigates it. But I guess I just don't see how in certain instances how you could even get an attack off. And like AoEs, I get like you cast a spell, AoEs are going to affect an invisible character because it doesn't matter if they're within the spell range. But what if you're blind as a caster? should you not have some penalty? Where, are you casting in the right direction? And I don't know, there may even be a rule on the books. I couldn't find it that says if you cast an AoE blind, how is that factored? Please, Max,
There's
jump
so much I
in.
want to say. So
Yeah.
many of the spells say you
That you
cast
that you
is
can
at
see.
a location you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it would negate a lot of spells, a lot of those AoE attacks.
Excellent.
That's a
Excellent.
really, it's a key word that's in there
Yeah,
that I know
that's
I've seen Jeremy Crawford, when that question
Right.
pops up, he says, if the spell says you can see, you must
Mhm.
be able to see it. If
yeah.
you are blind,
Yeah.
you cannot see it. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Hey,
So,
Egan, one
yeah.
other, just a quick point on, I've read some good stuff that says, as a DM, what you should do is allow the player to attack the spot that they think they're at, and if they're not there, just tell them they missed.
Right. Okay, but my question though, is that a rule?
So
Or is that something that
It's
you
an
tweak?
interpretation, I think,
Hmm.
let's
of
not
that
get
rule.
sidetracked, guys,
Yeah.
and arguing
oh man,
about
there's
this.
so much I could talk about
Oh yeah.
just on this.
Oh
All right.
yeah.
Awesome.
As
The
we
level of
talked about before, I mean, we
yeah,
could
Yeah.
debate each
there's
one of
so
these
much.
endlessly.
Yeah.
That it
So
for that
the
one, Egan?
yeah. Yes, I'm moving on because I've
Well, you'll
obviously
have another
triggered.
chance to
I
come
don't
around.
even disagree with you, Egan. I can defend why based on the rules of 5e's combat.
Sure. Hey.
I could lay it out for you
Yeah.
how the economy is supposed to work on why
Right.
it's
Well,
so
listen,
effective.
I like environment should play into it, right? Your
Lots
sand
of
and
reasons.
grass showing footprints. I get that. There are, you knock over a glass. I get it that there is some way to see someone, or at least in the right direction. But I mean, there is also a big difference between melee and range. I mean, I'm sorry. I go invisible and go 10 feet to the left, and you think I go 10 feet to the right. How do you even get a shot at disadvantage, right? That doesn't make sense to me because there's
And
still a
I mean,
chance that
I know for myself as a DM, I wouldn't. I wouldn't
You
give
could
you the
argue that
opportunity
the fact that
to
it's
hit.
disadvantage is that they were guessing which way you went. You could
yeah,
argue
but
that. You know
to
what I
me that
mean?
it's not punitive enough. That's what
Okay,
I'm
okay. We
going
said
with.
we weren't going
Okay,
to argue
anyways,
All
these
right,
rules.
we
moving
can
on.
talk
Yeah,
about we can talk
yeah. We said we weren't going to argue these because
we knew this was gonna happen.
we could literally spend the rest of the session talking. It's rules. Imagine a D&D group discussing the rules. Yeah, never
Oh man.
happens. Yeah,
There will be 3 chapters to this type of episode, guys. Just so you know, Tavern
yeah.
Talk Part 2.
Absolutely. All right. So for me, I'm gonna talk a little bit. Not so much. I'm not going to use hate. It's a big word, but you know, I definitely think it's something they missed the mark with, and it's a very difficult concept, and that is a monster challenge rating. So a game mechanic, right? As a DM, each monster has a challenge rating, its CR number, which is meant for the DM to give you an indication of how tough it will be in a fight. The problem with CR, well, there's two. I think there's lots of problems with it depending on how you splinter out. But the two big issues that come out of CR is, how did the monster builder intend for this monster to fight? Your ability to actually manipulate this monster has a lot to do with that CR rating. Whether or not it is actually an 8 or it is actually a 9, do you, as the DM, really know how to maximize this creature's attack abilities? So you've got that variable on one side of it, and then on the other side, I mean, it's based very much on character level, but there are so many other things that can come in when you're looking at your character's levels, in terms of what do they have for weapons, magical or not? What do they have for armor or armor classes? Special feats. Use something like, back when we were doing Storm King's Thunder, one of the group's favorite tactics was to cast a fog cloud, and that that really wreaked havoc on on the battlefield all the time. So, but then imagine you have two creatures the same CR, but one has blind sense and one doesn't. It completely changes what that CR means now because of the effectiveness of that creature, right? So it's a tough concept. And when you're using that then in trying to encounter build, it's difficult. And so my only advice, I'm kind of, don't think that CR is this perfect math, right? I mean, the Dungeon Master's Guide uses encounter building. CR is a big part of it. Xanathar's expanded on that. I think they got better. I actually use a really simple system that Sly Flourish has, and basically he says, add up your monster CRs, take half of your character levels, and if the monster CRs are greater than your half of your character levels, it's potentially deadly. So, I mean, in terms of just keeping it simple to get an idea, am I going to kill the group, or is this just going to be a really tough fight? It's worked for me as a really simple way to, because I don't know if anybody's looked at that math in Xanathar's. I'm not real great at the math, and it gets pretty exciting. So I mean, there's some good encounter builders too, but they just basically simplify that math. It's the same math, right? But yeah, CR is a tough one, and I know a lot of people have tackled. You know, it's one thing I think encounter building. Hopefully somebody comes up with a better system, but
Well, it's one of those things you'll get better with experience.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you just
Yeah, and
a good
understanding
starting point.
the group's true power, not just
Yeah.
based on their levels. All right, Barry, what do you got? Number 2. What rule do you want to talk about?
I picked the jack of all trades. Nightingale's a bard, and this is a really cool ability that, when you look into the fine details of it's got some pretty neat applications that you don't think about. So the rule as written, and every D&D rule lawyer out there loves to say that, is you can add half your proficiency bonus to an ability check. Now that's the key, ability checks, right? Like initiative is an ability check. It's a dexterity
Dexterity
ability
based,
check.
yeah.
So you can add half your proficiency to initiative.
And
Uh
that's the one that most people don't catch on to, right?
yeah, like everybody knows you can have your skill proficiencies. We all do that quite well, but a few other applications that I found really interesting, and they've been confirmed by Jeremy Crawford, is say you pick a bard and you get magical secrets and you pick counterspell. Your counterspell can use that because it's an ability check,
Interesting.
right? And to end effects that are cast on you, if it asks for an ability check, like minor illusion asks you to make an intelligence check, you can apply jack of all trades to that.
Yeah.
There's so many little tiny, you know,
Interesting. I didn't know those two.
Yeah.
subtle little, like Maximilian's Earth and Grass asks for a strength check to get out of it.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a skill check, not a save on it, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not a save, it's a
not a
skill check.
save, it's an actual ability check. Yeah.
Yeah.
And why I really like this is because bards are coming in pretty squishy. They're not big warriors, they struggle to really find a role. And this really rounds out a lot of those things that kind of gives them a little edge. The initiative bonus gives your bard that chance to go first in combat so that they can buff their allies and get out of danger's way, which I should do more often, but I, decide to get in the mouth of the beast per se. But yeah,
Literally.
it's just a really cool little kind of mechanic rule, however you want to look at it, that I think really adds a neat element to the bard class. And I just think it was a really great addition, that jack of all trades.
Cool. I like it. Good one. Max, what do you got?
Okay, I was gonna talk about how you can't just multi-class in anything you want. You have to meet certain minimum requirements, which I would say I also hate because I don't think it breaks the game necessarily to just
It
'cause
just
usually
might
the class-
underpower that class, but
Yeah, I'd say you actually underpower yourself a little bit, but that's more interesting and fun.
Yep.
Anyways,
Agreed.
but one, it's a very small rule, and Normally I'm all about. I enjoy sort of some of the nitpicky stuff because it makes you have to, make calculated choices. But the one where if you want to put away your weapons and draw something costs an action, and I'm like, forget that. They're trained warriors. They should be able to just swap a weapon quickly without having to drop things on the ground. You know what I mean? Like, now I can get it. Like, you shouldn't be able to like swap your weapons to a bow, fire that bow, then switch back to your sword so you can get an attack of opportunity against something that comes. You know what I mean? Like, of course. But the fact that you can't just like sling your bow, grab your sword, and go for it. Come on. That drives me nuts. Anyways, that's my that's probably my biggest. I have a homebrew where I rewrote that rule and I worked in so it didn't affect dual wielders. So if you took the dual wielding feat, you still got a bonus. It was a very calculated thing on my part because I hate that rule so much. But I wanted to make sure that it didn't. That's the tricky thing when if you're going to start making tweaks and things is you got to be really aware of what does that trivialize as far as other classes abilities and feats that can be picked up and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, you touched on it there with like dual wielder, right? You had the tweaks for dual wielder.
I was very conscious of what I was doing, but that's my one. That's the one I hate the most.
Nice. I agree with that one. I've always like.
It seems so silly. We play with it, and that's fine because as long as it's consistent, you know how to work with it, and that's that's the most important thing out of all this talk is like it's consistent at the table.
Anyway. Absolutely.
When we first started playing, Colin and I never ever thought about dropping a weapon to pull out another one. So I would always take the action to put away and pull out the bow, right? In that circumstance. And then we had a guy join us for a while, Nathan, and Nathan would just drop his weapon and draw his other one. And me and Colin were like, yeah, I guess you can go and just pick it up after. Like, damn.
By the rules, that actually works.
Yeah.
All right, Egan, what are you going to get us argue about it next?
Well, first I'd like to say my favorite tavern talk is Max and rules, so I think we should just constantly do this forever. Okay, so my other thing, and I'm sure it's going to get some reaction, is prone, the prone condition, and mostly how it pertains to the range attack against, right? Why is it disadvantage? Max, try to hold back. I'm sure you have a response to that.
Your opinion is valid. Everything you bring to the table is up for discussion and is meaningful to the discourse of D&D.
Okay, well, hear me out, all right? Now, I understand an argument can be made that the creature is now a smaller target, right? But conversely, their speed is also halved, right? Per the effects of the condition, their speed is halved, right? To move, you got to stand up. Half your movement is used to stand up. So shouldn't there be I don't understand why there's not a difference situationally between a character that is forced to be prone versus one that chooses to be, right? Like if I go into a prone position, then that's sort of more of a defensive posture, right? Similar to the dodge action, if you will. Which again, dodge, prone, it's basically the same thing. But someone who was forced prone, like knocked on their ass, I don't know why a ranged attack against that should be at disadvantage. It to me, it doesn't jive. That's just my interpretation. Because prone melee, you get advantage. So I think at best it should just wash out and just be a normal attack versus at disadvantage. And I do think there can be a difference between one that was intentionally falling versus someone that was knocked on their ass and they're basically going to, get hit with an arrow.
Well, you don't think that if I laid down in the middle of a stone-floored room, you would be harder to shoot me with a bow?
Well, but again, situational. I mean, if I'm 20 feet away and you just go to the ground, you're not as dexterous, right? I mean, again, monk and tabaxi notwithstanding.
Think about.
Yeah. But that's what I'm saying. It's not even adding a rule. It's literally just taking it away, right?
Yeah,
you're doing conditions for distance.
Yeah.
Well, no,
just for how they fell down.
A range. Yeah, I think.
Rules.
I think though there is a difference between someone who is intentionally, because this other game that I played, this monk just kept going to the ground after his attack. And because we had a whole bunch of enemies that were shooting bows, so he just went down to the ground. It was like, all right, that's smart.
Yeah,
I mean,
I feel like the rule is just as simple as there's less to shoot at. I think it really just came down to making it that simple, right? Which 5e tries to do with a lot of things. Just boil it down to the simplest thing. You drop to the ground, there's just a smaller target, so you're harder to hit. I definitely get where you're coming from, but then to what Max is saying, now you have to get into all kinds of additional rules around prone, right? So
I have other
Yes.
reasons too, but it's outside the scope of this video.
Max,
It's something
talk
related
after.
that I think should be addressed. Is they simplified the game, and that was great when it was played on a tabletop. But now that you got virtual tabletops that run mechanics for you, why not create some of these things that it takes range into account, it takes terrain, because all of that could be done instantly by the virtual tabletop.
That's
So
house rules and homebrews, though, right?
Yep.
So you
yeah,
can
Yep.
you can do
Absolutely.
all that stuff.
You
yeah.
absolutely just can add in all that stuff if that's like I said. I mean, there's rules for that kind of stuff that are way more complicated in previous versions that you can go back and look at and
Mhm.
adopt. For my next one, I wanted to touch real quickly on hit points. I definitely have a love-hate relationship with hit points. Um, I think a lot of people do if you start to overthink hit points, right? So I mean, the first thing anyone new to the game needs to remember is it is hit points, not health points. It is not a measurement of your character's health. It is basically an abstract idea around how long they can hold out in combat, through their endurance, their luck, their skill, all kind of piled in there together until that final blow hits them. I've always sort of in my head I thought about the first time I rolled that first hit dice for that character, that's sort of their health. That whatever it is, 4
12
to 8
points or
hit
8
points they
points or
kind of
whatever.
started out with, where when they didn't really have endurance and skill and luck and that in their, somebody went up and took a swing at them with the sword and killed them because they didn't have all of that fighting ability under there. So that's how I've kind of wrapped my head around it. Where it starts then to get a bit weird is, okay, I went down to 0 hit points, which means I received some gravest wound that was enough to knock me unconscious. But now, just by somebody coming over with a medical kit or something, I'm good. I'm right. I'm just bounce right back again. I'm good. Or hey, just let me have a good night's rest. And it was like this battle never even happened. But like so many things, they just had to simplify that concept to give us some sort of measurement, that we could say you can fight this hard for this long and then you get knocked down, right? But just the point I really want to make is people who are new to the game, I think, come into it thinking health points, and then it's like, okay, how did I take 100 health points of damage, but then overnight I'm like, I'm good, don't worry about it, it's fine, right? It's not. It's and that's why a short rest makes sense, because you're just resting up, getting some of that endurance and that back again, so you could fight some more, right? So it's actually it's one of the things I most want to learn more about other systems and how they deal with that whole concept. All right. Yeah, we burned up a half hour pretty quick, as we always do. I do think this definitely lends itself to maybe us picking a rule every now and then and just debating out the rule. You know, because
That could be fun. I
as
know.
we as
I don't know if Max
it's
is into that. I don't
as
know.
it's very clear, you know, we're four people with four very well, no, I wouldn't say very different, but varying degrees of, you know, the way we think about specific rules, and that's the game. You know, that is, you know, and I want to lean into what you said a little bit there, Max, where you know, with all the rules in this game, that they're flexible around their interpretation, and really all the table needs to do is agree on how you're going to use the rule and then be consistent with how you're going to use the rule. And then, you know, then there shouldn't be any reason with anybody's interpretation of it. I mean, you can wander off to another table, and you know, we know, Egan, you've definitely seen it recently with some of the tables you know, and they interpret the rules very differently, and they're not wrong. It's just that's
Just
their
the play.
interpretation of
Yeah.
the rules,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, well let's wrap this up. Barry, your final thoughts on D&D 5e rules? Any last thoughts for somebody that might be new or frustrated or
Yeah. It's probably for those new people out there. There are a lot of rules, and understand that you, as the dungeon master, say you're the dungeon master. If you don't want to get overwhelmed by the rules, simplify the choices of books your players get to pick from. Make
Yeah, that's
them
very good.
draw
Yep.
from the player's handbook for classes, and that's it. So it'll simplify things for you, because every book that came out either changed rules, added rules, or just made it more and more complicated. So keep it simple, limit the choices, and like Colin said, don't be afraid to discuss with your group how hard or fluid you want to be with the rules when you're playing.
Yeah, no, I that's really solid advice for a new DM. Simplify the number of books you're using right out of the gate, so that will reduce the number of rules, and then add in books as you're feeling more comfortable, right? Max?
All right. This is for you players out there. Just because you don't like a rule doesn't mean it's not a good one. All right. The rules aren't there to make everyone feel great. They're there to allow for a satisfying experience. So if there's something that doesn't feel like it allows you to do whatever you want, that's probably a good thing in the long run. And you might not understand that if you're fresh and new, but if you've been playing a long time, you understand that 100%. So
Yeah.
just
Here,
listen to your
here.
dungeon master. If they're being fair, then you really have no reason to argue about it. So
Yeah.
They could always become a killer
The
DM.
rules weren't all put in place for a pixie dust and unicorn
yeah,
fart outcome, right? I mean,
yeah, yeah.
it's just that's not what it's all about. Some of some of it's gonna suck, and that
Yeah.
makes the stuff that's good that much better, right?
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
Egan.
Well, I think that segues pretty well. You know, the table agrees on rules, and that's what you agree to, and just roll with it. You know, not everything is going to be great, but what I do like about 5e that has taken, you know, even from the early beginnings of D&D, is the flexibility to change what the table doesn't like or doesn't work for them. You know, if the what do you call it, jack of all trades, you know, the DM might say, no, I don't want initiative to be kicked in, it's just my choice, and everybody agrees to it. I mean, we didn't get into encumbrance, which was one of my other items that you know, is a common thing that is,
Not now, Egan.
I know, that is left off. But at the end of the day, rules, as long as the table agrees, D&D 5e has set it up to where you can easily flow and change just about any role out there, including HP, Colin. You can make it anything you want.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, dropping to zero can be debilitating. I've played in a game where you drop to zero, you lose a leg. And
Oh yeah, I mean,
this is actually
lingering
what happened.
injuries,
Yep.
permanent injuries. There's all kinds of different ways people
Yep.
play
Yep.
that with that, right?
Yep. But again, if the table agrees, just roll with it and have some fun.
So I see our super fan is on here with us tonight. So I just want to say hello. We got here with Light is with
Nice.
us tonight, and You made a
It
comment
really
about
seems like-
around the rules that I really am going to use as part of my conclusion here. Just the rules ultimately are guidelines. They are no more hard, fast, and must be used than the group decides works for them, right? So, I've seen a meme before taken from Pirates of the Caribbean where they talk about the rules. They be more like guidelines, and I really like looking at the rules that way because if they don't work for you and your group, change them. Just change them. We talked about a little bit. If you're going to change the rules, at least make an effort to understand why the rule was written the way it was. That'll give you a better idea of how to safely change it. Because when you start messing with a lot of the rules, there's a lot of interaction that can start to happen. Max, you talked about it, where you were very aware of the fact that making that change affected some other things that you had to also make a change around, right? Don't ever feel like you're locked to any of the rules. Make up your own, drop some, use your own interpretation of the rules. We definitely do that. I'm a DM. I tend to, when I don't know exactly how the rule works, I just go with the rule of cool. What is going to be the most fun possibility for the characters? Let's give that a shot. Roll for it. The higher you roll, the more exciting the outcome is going to be. The lower you roll, the more it's going to suck. The further away you're going to be from the outcome that you were trying to get to, right? Keep it simple. Keep the game flowing. Don't get caught up in the rules. They're there to make the night fun, not to destroy the fun by beating up the rule book all night long. Well, yeah, I definitely think we could get into some good
trilogy.
rules this stuff. Yeah, we'll definitely pick up this topic again at some point. Maybe specifically around a rule that would be fun to debate on a little bit. But yeah, I think that's going to be a wrap for episode 14 of Roll by Roll's Tavern Talk. So hopefully everyone enjoyed tonight's topic. Tavern Talks occur the Tuesday after each of our Saturday night Adventures in Emathan sessions, with the recording posted to our YouTube channel on Thursdays. So our next session is scheduled for February 18th. For those of you who may be watching this on YouTube, please support us by making sure to like our videos and subscribe to our channel. Hit that little bell icon so you'll be alerted the next time we post a video. So at the end of the episode, we will do as we always do, gentlemen. We will offer a cheers. Cheers, guys. Thanks very much for another good night.
Did I break a rule?
You could break a rule, yeah.
You can
break a-
talk
you can
about
We're
break
that.
a rule.
flexible. We're flexible.
We need to talk about that.
So thanks for joining us in the tavern, and hopefully you can join us next time. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.